This week on the Eldritch Lorecast, the American use of opaque. Okay.
Now, hold on. What else could opaque mean?
Like baking paper.
No, what? No.
I don't know.
No,
We've
you got
hijacked
transparency,
James's
which
point.
you can see through.
Wizards, you're free to license this idea from us.
Find that somewhere in future.
Great and detailed news.
Is that D&D? And I'm like, yeah, that's D&D.
That was a funny joke. You could go ahead.
I just heard you call me old is basically what I just heard. So.
No, this person's a bit weird.
I'm sitting right here.
Joey and Shawn are both open-minded individuals, and I'm suspicious as hell.
And I happen to write half of that.
These are my favorite moments when someone's like, tell us about this thing. And Ben and I go, we don't know what that is. And Shawn's like, I wrote it.
Because I want that music has recognition with like something epic.
And you're all like, oh, the music is so nice. There will be blood.
All that and more right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 live-streamed tabletop RPG podcast in all of Twitch. I'm sure that happens to be true if you actually check the statistics. My name is Ben Byrne, and I'm here, as always, joined by Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake. And James, I have to ask, during your break, this recent sort of holiday period, did you get to play any games, and do you have any memories to share of playing games during the break?
Yes, I played a lot of games over the break. I think the most memorable one was for me playing a game of what's it called? It's the it's not One Night Ultimate Werewolf, but it's One Night Revolution. It's the one set in the Resistance universe. I gave it as a Christmas gift to one of my cousins, and for the first time in years in my recent memory, I got all of my cousins on that side of the family together, not all of whom are big gamers. We all sat down at a table together and we played some really, really good rounds of lying to each other in a cyberpunk setting. It was fantastic. It was so good. And, there were some good games of D&D in there. I bought 3 copies of a game that Dael and I played at PAX Australia for people because I loved it so much. Parks, a game about going on hikes in the U.S. national parks. Very cute. Very fun. Bought 3 copies of it for different people, and I played that a bunch of times. So it's been a good holiday for games.
Nice. I'm glad to hear it. I did have like a little subsection to this question, which was if you didn't play games, what games would you want to play in future? I haven't had to rely on that yet. I'm glad you've had a very gaming holiday period, James.
Pressure's on, Shawn.
Shawn Merwin,
we better have played some.
Have you played some games? And if you haven't, I don't know what's going to happen.
This break is one of the few times where I really get to dive into games. So boy, did I. I played an app game called Baba Is You.
Yes.
Which was a lot of fun. I played It Takes Two and A Way Out on Xbox because my daughter's home from college. So we get to have our daughter, father double gaming time.
That's so sweet.
Board games. I played The Initiative and Codename Duets. And I got a couple sessions of a little adventure called Citadel of the Unseen Sun. Finally got our gaming group together and got a couple more sessions of that in. So yes, I had a great gaming vacation.
Excellent. I'm so glad to hear it. Dael, the pressure comes down to you. What games did you play during the break?
Digitally, I've been playing an awful lot of Marvel Snap. Cosmic Postman is in chat saying, does the drunk Snap stream count as a game? For starters, I was not drunk. I was tipsy. And it was the theme of the game. And you know what? We lost a lot of cubes that day.
Is that bad?
It's bad.
Right. Yes, cubes, famous in the Marvel universe for being important.
Yeah, I don't know. They look like Tesseracts,
Have you
but
not
they're
seen
not.
the Avengers, Ben? Yes, they are important.
There's
It
one
centers
cube.
around a cube, the most important cube in the galaxy.
It's all about a cube.
Come on.
Touche. Fair point.
I've been playing a lot of Marvel Snap. I ran a Christmas one shot for my friends while one was visiting from Melbourne, and it was sort of inspired by Tolkien's Father Christmas letters, where there's the storage ice caves underneath the North Pole workshop, and goblins have infiltrated, and it was a little bit spooky, I hope. That was fun. And I also got from my friend Omar, as a Christmas present, I got a book that's called The Paper Labyrinth, but it's basically the whole book is a riddle. So you have to kind of solve things. So I've been solving riddles with my family, which is it's a lot of fun.
Nice. I have been playing and losing a lot of Infinity the game. I just can't seem to wrap my head around that. And in classic Ben style, our D&D games were not Christmas themed, but in fact, almost a TPK every session themed, which was not entirely deliberate. But when you play your cards right, you can almost get them every time. Anyway, moving right along. This week, let us jump into the news. Not much happened this week, I don't think. I don't think there's a lot to talk about.
Nah.
So we can just move right along. No, of course, I'm kidding. There is quite a lot of news at the moment. The tabletop RPG industry is in a transition time, let's say. I'm going to basically speak to the news around the OGL as it pertains to Ghostfire. As we all know, the OGL has been a very hot conversation within the tabletop RPG industry in the last couple of weeks, particularly the last week. What does the future of the tabletop RPG industry look like for third-party creators, as well as freelance writers, artists, map makers, and many, many more folk that work in some capacity inside this industry? And we have been asked a lot what a new OGL could mean for Ghostfire Gaming. And we want to be as honest and transparent as we possibly can. And the truth right now is we don't know. We do not know what the future holds. So this is a really uncertain time, obviously, as I've said, for the entire tabletop RPG industry. We want to make decisions with the best interests of our loving community and our passionate team at the forefront of our minds. And then sort of separately from that, of course, we want the Eldritch Lorecast to be a place where you come and get news and information about the tabletop RPG industry, as well as, of course, the Witcher Watch, also very important. But we don't want to speculate at the moment on a situation that is still very up in the air and affects so many folks within the tabletop RPG industry, both inside and outside of the Lorecast and Ghostfire. So all we can say for certainty right now is that Ghostfire Gaming will continue to create awe-inspiring games for the tabletop community. We're still going to make dank things. And we hope all of our third-party industry friends will too. And that's kind of all we have to say on that at this current moment. We may have more to say as this situation evolves. Chances are something will change immediately after we finish recording.
That is the Lorecast way.
That is the Lorecast way, yes. Speaking of dank things, is that something that the kids say these days? I'm not really sure. I actually almost left this off the news sheet, but then I was reminded of it, and I just quickly want to give a quick shout out and congratulations to Jacob Buds from XP to Level 3, if you're aware of his YouTube channel. The Quest-O-Nomicon was the book that he authored with his team that Ghostfire published through Kickstarter. And it has just started fulfilling. So I hope everybody who's getting their hands on their Quest-O-Nomicon is enjoying it. Jacob's really happy with it. I had a friend just the other day say that they got theirs.
Questo's really good, y'all. I can't wait for you guys to see that, honestly.
Sorry, go ahead, James.
Oh, I'm just musing about things that happened 3 months ago while I was in Australia. I miss being there. I miss being in the office. I miss like being able to have Simon walk around the desk and be like, look at these cool cards. And I'm like, these cards. Anyway.
Yeah, and the magnetic GM screen is super cool. Simon did a lot of awesome work on Quest-O. So it's awesome that it's getting into folks' hands. Speaking of other viral things in the tabletop RPG industry, I just thought this would be super fun for us to talk about. Is anybody here taking part in #Dungeon23?
I didn't hear about it until you put it in the run sheet for today, and I think it's the coolest thing ever. And now I'm a little bit like,
I'm doing it super casually. Yeah, it's the if I feel pressure to do this, I'll hate it.
You'll have like a 100-room mega dungeon. Explain what it is. Explain what it is for the people, Benjamin.
So Dungeon23, I had to kind of squirrel back because this thing's gone viral. So I had to squirrel back. So I hope I've got these facts correct. Was originated by Shawn McCoy of Tuesday Night Games. And I know 2 Rooms and a Boom was a game of theirs that I'm familiar with. I've actually never gotten to play it. But it sounds really, really cool. But we're not talking about 2 Rooms and a Boom. We're talking about Dungeon23, which is every day for 2023, you come up with a single room for a dungeon. So it's a mega dungeon by the end of the year. You'll have 12 levels. You'll have 365 rooms, and you should write 1 room per day and keep it all in a journal. And I think the idea as well is not to get too stressed or hung up on this being like every room being
don't be
the master created
yeah.
room. Yeah, exactly. It's just design, physically design the space if you want to, make a couple of notes about what's in that room and then move on to the next day. Or if you want to dive more into it, of course you can. But it's not meant to be an anxiety-inducing experience, as sometimes keeping up with these things can be through social media. It is meant to be a fun, communal thing that we are all doing together. Dael, if you are going to jump in, what would your dungeon look like?
I was thinking about this, and I don't know the answer. The things that came to mind were things like, a classic, like a wizard's tower that, breaks the rules of space and time, or like the magic faraway tree, sort of, you travel to different places through the tree. But I think the idea that sprang to mind that I liked the most was doing like a sci-fi derelict massive ship floating through space, and you're like, Your scavengers trying to get cool scrap from the ship and going through room by room there. So, I mean, it's not very D&D, but I mean...
Why does it have to be D&D?
Yeah, exactly. Why does it got to be D&D? Why does it got to be D&D? I think that sounds like a fun time.
It is Dungeon23, no dragons to be seen. Unless you want there to be dragons, I suppose.
I had to explain to my family, I brought this up, and I had to explain to them that while dungeon can mean a literal dungeon, it also has expanded to not only mean dungeons. A dungeon can be many things, but it took a lot of explaining to go, no, but it doesn't have to be underground though.
Yeah,
there's going to be a lot of skeletons chained up by their wrists in this place. What are you talking about?
The Skyrimian version.
Conceptual dungeon. What do you think you would populate this ship with if it was going? Like, are we thinking like I was going to say Left 4 Dead, but that's not right. Dead Space style, like it's these like Cthulhian type monsters. Is it a horror experience?
I think it would be a horror experience because there is something so spooky about an empty ship drifting through space, right? Especially one that's that big. There's something very scary about that. So I would want it to be a little bit Mary Celeste. I would want it to be a little bit Halo, probably Flood end of Halo.
Yeah.
A little bit, Dead Space, that kind of thing. I do. I just kind of want it to be a bit spooky. I think the other thing that is, I've been watching Let's Plays of the Dark Pictures anthology games. And so somewhere in amongst that, I've got in my head The Man of Medan, which is a ghost ship story, plus the previews for the next game, which is happening in space. So horror, spaceship, ghost ship is very, very in there. Probably a bit of Firefly too. I think that'd fit.
If you end up doing this, I want to see it because I've been thinking about running Infinity, the role-playing game, or Cyberpunk, or I've got a hankering for like some sci-fi or some cyberpunk or some just like futuristic fiction style campaign because I've played a lot of fantasy. And now that you've said that, I'm like, that would be a cool campaign. Is a mega dungeon, right? Like a Blackstone Fortress style, like go in and just explore more of it. And then, you have some objective, which is to find the thing at the center or start the station up. And this room affects that room over there. And, radios between two, like work between two specific rooms, but not otherwise. So the party can't talk to each other verbally until they get to like another room.
Some rooms are radiated. So you got to turn on the systems that lock down the radiation before you can get into them.
Yes. Have you guys played Deep Rock Galactic? Because I've been playing
I've never even heard of Deep Rock Galactic
over the winter break. Holy crap, you guys. We've got to play this together. When are we doing a Ghostfire stream of Deep Rock Galactic? It is a game. It's sort of Left 4 Dead style, a 4-player co-op shooter where you play as dwarves in space, mining an exoplanet for resources. And there are these bug-like aliens that infest it. All sorts of biomes. Like there's a radioactive biome. There's an ice biome. There's deep caves. Deep Rock Galactic is really, really fun. There's 4
what are you doing
classes. Right now? Yeah, I mean, if no one's doing anything,
you know what? We got no news to talk about this week, so.
It kind of scratches the Minecraft itch for me. It scratches the Left 4 Dead itch for me, and it's full of dwarves. And like all the dwarves, the different classes are voiced by the same guy, but they just like pitch shift his voice to be the different guys. It's very cute.
Oh man, I feel like I would have to learn a more sci-fi appropriate system if I was going to do a full-on sci-fi dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
Which I am now in this moment realizing the only sci-fi RPG I think I've ever played, as in tabletop RPG, is Paranoia, which
Mothership.
Somebody did suggest the Alien RPG, which I know Dante played a bit earlier in the year. I think see, I don't know enough about it. I think the only reason I wouldn't want to do use that system is because I wouldn't want it to be Alien. I think that like once my party have a scope of the thing that haunts them through the ship, then they're going to be like, oh, we're playing Alien. Oh, okay, so it's Alien. So that's what we're doing. You know, a lot of the mystery is lost. Maybe Alien can be tinkered with, obviously, so it doesn't have to be literally a Ridley Scott Alien. Shawn, have you played it before, Shawn?
I haven't. I hope to soon. The Star Trek RPG would work.
Okay.
Ooh.
For that, you could just sort of twist it a little bit to add that spookiness to it. But yeah, I think that would work.
Shawn, what would you design if you were doing Dungeon23? I know you do designing as your day job, so I can't assume you're like thrilled to do it in your after hours as well.
Do it now. Do it live.
Right. No, I mean, this is what I do every day, right? So it's actually great practice for you to try this, to see, can you keep that pace up? Even just getting an idea and not necessarily mapping and statting out and doing all of that. It's good practice for creativity. What would I do? I've had this idea before, and it is sort of weird. These cultists capture 12 leaders of different religions on this planet who have come together in a conclave. And they want to draw the power out of these religious leaders. And to do this, they need to put them in their own separate prisons, but they want to keep them there. So they try to convince them that they're dead by making these dungeons, these areas that would be their nirvanas, their last final resting places. And so you as the adventurers are tasked to rescue them. So you have to go into each of these locations, which are essentially the afterlife of each of these different religious leaders, or what they think it is, but it's done poorly because these cultists don't have infinite resources. So there's a little bit of weirdness to each of the places, because, you know, the leader of the fire god is his heaven, his afterlife is going to look different than the leader of this other. So each can be very different. But there's also this little bit of humor to it, because you can have this afterlife be not quite real, or as real as you would think it would be. And that's what I would go with for my 365 room mega dungeon, 12 different dungeons setup.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
Is the idea that every level is like a different nirvana that one of these priests is sort of living within?
Right. Exactly. So yeah, each would be very different based on, and then you could have a theme, right? This leader of the peace god, everything's going to be very serene and tranquil, but behind the scenes, all of these cultists are doing all of these things to keep it that way, and it's completely chaotic. And then you throw the adventurers in on top of that. You could have lots of chaotic, fun, weird scenes going on.
Nice.
Trying to maintain the appearance of an afterlife for a god of like order as
Right.
soon as you add adventurers into the mix.
Exactly.
I just love this idea of playing with like the misunderstanding of religions in the way that like Hideo Kojima, doesn't seem to quite understand like American militarism. So there's kind of like a weird, it's like it's gone through like Google Translate a few times back and forth, and just trying to like represent these religions in a slightly off way. I feel like inventing them in the first place and then making them feel skew-if, I think would be a lot of fun. James Hake, your dungeon.
Yes. My
what
dungeon.
Would it look like?
I've been playing a lot of Bloodborne recently, and games like that, games like Bloodborne and Dark Souls, and maybe a bit of a twist third Super Metroid, do a really good sort of mega dungeon, video game as mega dungeon scenario, because the thing about mega dungeons that speak to me are the way that the different zones within them interconnect. And you may find looping routes that backtrack you right on top of where you were, 5 sessions ago, but now you're coming at it from a different angle. You have a different vantage point, that sort of thing. There's this great sequence in kind of the early to mid game of Bloodborne, where there's a huge gate. And if you have a certain crest, you can just open it. And the only way to get that crest is to spend a lot of your money / XP, because they're the same thing in that game. So you have to survive long enough to build up a huge stockpile of this to open the gate. Or if you go exploring and find some secret areas, you can wind your way through this very sort of dangerous, sort of deep underbelly of the city, and eventually find your way to an elevator that takes you up to a different area that's on the other side of that gate, but you don't know it until you've kind of wound your way through and discovered, oh my God, this connects right back to this place I was trying to get through so long ago. And that sort of makes this world that, even though it is, technically linear, feel really, really dense. And so that's the kind of world I would love to create. That's the sort of game design that went into the final dungeon in Call of the Netherdeep, when Sadie, Lowry, and I worked on that one together. So I would try to do something like that. It wouldn't necessarily have to have that bloody, gothic, cosmic horror feel that Bloodborne has, though I am really vibing with that right now. But if there are a bunch of different, very sort of clearly environmentally distinct areas, like a castle and a forest and a swamp and a desert plain, there are all these secret passageways that were driving themselves together. That would make me happy. It doesn't matter what else it is.
How do you, because I've thought about this a little bit. I just played, speaking of games, over the holiday break, God of War, Ragnarok. Finished that recently. Still going for the true ending. But it has like a very light version of what you're talking about. It's a lot like Batman Arkham games had this as well. Not quite to the level of like a Metroidvania or what the Souls games seem to do. But basically, you're exploring through a maybe branching rather than open area. And I'm one of those gamers that kind of like, if I see a fork in the road, I have to like hedge my bets, go kind of halfway down each one until I figure out which one is not the proper way to go, explore everything down there, and then go down the forward path until you come up against things that you can't get past in a video game, because you're like, oh, okay, that looks interesting, but I don't have anything to interact with that. I'm not getting a button prompt. Okay, obviously I'm going to have to come back later and interact with that with a tool that I don't have yet. Mm-hmm. How do you create that sense in a tabletop RPG where the limitations are sometimes only what the players, can imagine? Because, you say, oh, there's a ledge all the way up there that it doesn't appear you can get to now. And then a player's like, oh, I've got fly. I cast fly and go up there, like how do you create those things to create intrigue, but players realizing they're not necessarily meant to solve this problem now? It's something they're meant to come back to.
This is something I've thought about like the entire time I've been playing D&D, because my introduction to dungeon-based fantasy gaming wasn't like Western computer RPGs. It was The Legend of Zelda. And they do that sort of like lock and key system really blatantly. And I'm like, well, how can I do something like this in a D&D dungeon? And I've just kind of learned over the course of doing this that the answer is you do it anyway and just accept that they're going to bypass it.
Yeah.
Because the cool part isn't necessarily the backtracking. It's the feeling that this is all one complete space, and that it feels like it's looping and interweaving and interconnected. If they use their ingenuity to get past your obstacle, that's a win for you anyway, because all of a sudden they haven't just found something cool in the story. They've tricked you. They've bypassed your puzzle. They've done that, and they feel very cunning about it. And that's just a win all in all. If they go exploring further and find the key that you intended, then they're like, aha, we didn't need this. Maybe we can find some other use for it now.
Sure. Gotcha. That's fair. I think, Dael, you might have mentioned it before. I looked at the Twitch chat, so I got slightly distracted. But if I was going to do a Dungeon 23, I think I would want to do the time dilated kind of dungeon where each level is the same space in a different time. Almost Chrono Trigger style.
Sick.
Oh.
That's sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not mention that. I said a wizard's tower that was kind of out of space and time, that ignored space and
That's
time.
what I heard. Yeah.
That idea is much cooler than mine was.
Well, I've always played with the idea of, like, I've mentioned it on the Lorecast before, of like a dungeon kind of like in Dishonored or Titanfall 2, where you skip between two time periods, and, you know, a door frame that's collapsed that you can't get through in one period is repaired in the other in the past, so you can walk through it. But if I'm going to do 12 levels, I think even for a space as big as 30 rooms a level or 31 rooms a level, it still feels a little bit like coming up with what's different in every room across 12 versions might be a little bit dense. So I think what I would do is make it a slightly abstract the dungeon a little bit and think more of it like Chrono Trigger, so that like you go like far into the future where there's, you know, futuristic technology and there's, you know, you're almost playing a sci-fi game at that point, and then right back into, you know, Neolithic times and everything kind of in between. I feel like I would either need to choose the system to use for that game based on the time period the players start in, and then just accept that there's going to be wizards in a sci-fi setting, like much like Chrono Trigger kind of does. And you, in your party, you have a robot and a vampire and a frogman by the end of the game. Or pick a very open system like Fate or something where it's sort of, you know, the time period doesn't necessarily matter as much as the concepts and ideas behind your characters. Yes, Matty P. Play Chrono Trigger. You as a frog enthusiast will enjoy the original Chrono Trigger, I suspect. Yeah. Has anybody seen Dungeon23 Dungeons Online that they've been excited? Like, is anybody following someone specific that is doing it?
Dyson Logos, the greatest map maker alive, I say, is doing Dungeon23 right now, and I love to follow what he does.
Nice. I'm just going to post, unless our mod does, a quick link to Shawn McCoy's website, which has kind of like the initial concept for Dungeon23 if you want to jump in. It's also got, beat you to it, Kat. It's also got, I don't know if she posted it before, I didn't see.
She did. She did.
Okay, cool. Okay, she beat me to it. Uno reverse card on the SMARM. So if anybody wants to get involved, it's obviously not too late. We're only a little bit into the year, but also, you know, if it's something that you want to jump into in February, you decide, you know what, I do have time for this. You know, instead of trying to play catch up, your dungeon has 11 levels instead. I'm sure that's totally fine. Speaking of knowing how things are and being able to see the future, Lego Ideas and the D&D crossover has a winner. I called it.
I feel like
Which
we
one
all
is it?
did. Didn't we all?
Yeah, I think it was the general consensus favorite. It was the Dragon's Keep Journey's End is the name of it.
The one with
It's
the like tower with the dragon on the side.
Coming down.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sort of
The little Tudor-style
semi-agnostic looking
houses.
one.
You know, I stick with it, saying that there wasn't anything particularly D&D about it, but it was freaking sweet.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I've got good news for you, James, because you should be able to get your hands on it at some point in the future. I'm not sure exactly how it works from here.
This is
but
great news.
Yeah,
Woohoo!
Lego will
Wow.
turn it into a proper set at some point.
Great and detailed news.
It might be slightly different from what the original design was. The original design was by Lucas Bolt. You can find them on Instagram. Bolt.builds is their handle on Instagram, where you can see a couple of other angles of their creation, but also some other Lego things that they've built. So
You know what they should do to the set to make it D&D specific is one of the little minifigs that's there, because they had a couple little minifigs going, a dragon, make one of them Drizzt. You're done.
Yep.
Done.
Solved. Done.
Seriously.
Genuinely, though, that would work.
That's such an easy
or
dub.
give
Yeah.
statistics to each of the NPCs that are there and the dragon.
Have little
And-
character sheets.
Exactly.
Oh, Have you ever seen the little Lego pieces of paper? As in, they'll be like, here's a decree from the king or whatever. But it'll have, strength, dex. But I love
Wizards,
that.
You're free to license this idea from us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of like you've got like you get one Lego head for each character, but you get 2 different costumes, which is like a hoodie and then like their fantasy character. So you can make them as themselves and make them as their characters as well. Perfect. I wouldn't be surprised if they changed the dragon to red. I think green aesthetically looks better and is a little bit more like fantasy agnostic, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it red in the proper set. Find that somewhere in future. Eldritch Lorecast, detailed up to the minute news. Yeah, exactly. Speaking of news, we have no more of it because it is time to move on to listener emails.
Listener emails.
If you want to email, you can email podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. And we will take that email and I will present it to our hosts here. You can also leave us questions in the chat as well. If you want to ask us questions, during a segment or about a segment as they're going. All right. So our first listener email, podcast@ghostfiregaming.com, comes from Chad, who wants to know about the Realm of Shadow. The Realm of Shadow doesn't get a lot of discussion. Have you used it in your games? I don't know what the Realm of Shadow is myself.
Neither do I.
I don't know if it's even appeared in like any of the adventures across 5th edition.
It really mustn't get a lot of love because you and I haven't heard of it.
Yeah.
Well, no, I feel like I vaguely know that there is a Realm of Shadow, but I don't know anything about it.
I banish you to the Shadow Realm.
To the Shadow Realm.
So I just started watching Stranger Things with my mom. It'd be like my 3rd watch through, her very first, and I'm very excited about it. And every time something D&D comes up, she asks me, is that D&D? And I'm like, yeah, that's D&D. In the first season of Stranger Things, when they're talking about the Upside Down for the first time, spoilers for Stranger Things season 1, I don't know. They
I haven't watched it yet.
Have you not, Dael?
I've watched half of it, but I don't care about spoilers. That was a funny joke. You can go ahead.
Okay, anyway. They compare the other dimension, the dark, twisted mirror of the real world that they call the Upside Down, to the Veil of Shadows. And they pull out a binder that, much like old AD&D books, had, photocopied sheets of paper, 3-hole punched in. It had that 3-column layout that old D&D books had, all black and white. And it's like, my mom turns to me and says, is that a D&D thing? And I'm like, it's actually not. They just kind of made that up for some reason. Because the Plane of Shadows was a thing in 3rd edition. And the Shadowfell has been a thing from 4th edition onward. And that's basically exactly what it is. It's a sort of dark reflection of, it might not be the real world. It might be sort of an aspect of the Feywild now. Actually, Shadowfell lore is pretty confusing to me now that I think about it. But it's something that is so oft discussed but frequently misunderstood that even Stranger Things just decided to cut through the Gordian knot and say, we're going to make up our own similar sounding thing, even though we filled the season with Demogorgons anyway.
Yeah, the Plane of Shadows has been around since 1st edition, but even then it was unknown, it was unknowable, it changed depending on what the game master needed it to be. Sometimes it was just a shadowy thing, and sometimes it was an undead thing, and sometimes it was a hellish thing. And then with 4th edition, as James said, they came up with the Shadowfell. In fact, the very first adventure that they released for 4th edition was Keep on the Shadowfell, which created this space ruled by the Raven Queen, sort of the queen of the dead, but not in any way that you might recognize. Not good, not evil. Sort of like a Hades, but not really like that at all.
Because there's already a Hades in our planar cosmology.
Yeah, exactly. So like souls kind of went there before they went elsewhere. And so everyone was like, I guess this is the Plane of Shadows. And it always has been, just like we've always been at war with East Asia. And we sorry, that was, anyway.
Bit of geopolitical humor there for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Bit of risk humor.
So, in fact, they did an adventure path for 4th edition. Keep on the Shadowfell was the first. The 6th one was called Assault on Nightworm Fortress. And I happened to write half of that, and with Bruce Cordell. And I was like, okay, what is the Shadowfell? Because my half of the adventure is where you first go to the Shadowfell.
These are my favorite moments when someone's like, tell us about this thing. And Ben and I go, we don't know what that is. And Sean's like, I wrote it.
I didn't write it because I really didn't know what it was, even based on the reading that I had done. It was sort of put together with what was the other place? The
Feywild.
The Feywild, thank you. So it was sort of the offset of the Feywild, both being contiguous with the material plane, sort of overlapping it, so you're always connected to it. They even came out with a book called Heroes of Shadow, which is, hey, you want a new power source for your characters? Here you go. We have the Shadow Kai. We have assassins who don't just assassinate you, but they use the power of shadow to do so. And you want to play a vampire? Well, we're not going to make it a species or a race. We're going to make it a class. And we're going to attach it to this sort of shadowy thing, this realm of shadows that we're calling the Shadowfell. And so it became sort of this catch-all thing that you could use to do creepy, but shadowy, but nefarious, but also deathly things. So have you used it in my games? Yes, I have, in many different ways, using many different directions, spawning many different stories. But you really can use it any way that you want, because it can mean so many things. Shadow can mean so many things. You need light to have shadow. Shadow is, the realm of death-ishness, maybe. It's all there to use. Go back to previous editions and look at how they used it, and it might you might spawn some neat stories or neat mechanics for your own game.
All of this has made me realize that I have played in a game basically with the Plane of Shadows / Shadowfell. That was the 4th edition Colville game, which my character ended up trapped in the Shadowfell by themselves for a while, and it was very frightening. And I don't know, it's like Shawn is saying, you can use it in so many different ways, and it ended up being used to introduce a new faction of bad guys in the form of this army of shadow elves who are trying to basically invade the material plane. That's really fun and cool. Plus, on top of that, we ended up with weird story elements where we were trying to get this group of humans, just civilians, through this horrible forest, basically. But we kept butting up against these hobgoblins who were trying to murder us really badly, and they were succeeding. And so we kind of thought, if only we could get all the humans into the Shadowfell. So we took them into this differently, not less, but differently dangerous place, and traveled through there. So I don't know, there's all these cool little things. I think, I could be wrong, but I think that part of that adventure was inspired by Keep on the Shadowfell. So yeah, I don't know, lots of interesting, fun stuff to do. And there were like shadow versions of us, but it was more like different realities of, like, if we'd made different choices, there were other versions of us that could be kind of seen in the Shadowfell. Yeah, lots of fun stuff.
I do think that the Shadowfell is an excellent sort of catch-all area because of its ambiguity. Like Critical Role famously used the Shadowfell in its first campaign as the place where Vecna was hiding, where the Whispered One was hiding, kind of waiting, trying to remain under the gods' radar. And that campaign beat, I remember getting a little bit fouled up by the release of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, because it reasserted a bit of 4th edition lore that the Raven Queen was there. And the Raven Queen in that campaign had already been very, very important. And all of a sudden, there was this weird kind of compromise happening in the very finale of the campaign, where the Shadowfell was like, oh, but now the Raven Queen gets it back, even though she's kind of been off doing something else somewhere, because you got Vecna out of there. And it's like, this is a beat that didn't come up previously in any of this story, but seems to be kind of backfilling lore, because at that part of the Critical Role life cycle, it was very sort of rubbing shoulders with wizards in a way it's kind of diverged from since.
Yeah.
Legends of Vox Machina 2 is getting a lot of trailer releases right now, so that's on the mind. It does make me wonder how that particular arc of the campaign will go as they build towards it. That's many, many years in the future, I reckon.
I'm glad you've brought that up, actually, just as a reminder for us. Do we, as a Lorecast, we're going to decide right now, Legends of Vox Machina Season 2, I think it's only a couple days away, isn't it? It's like January 20-something off the top of my head. I think we said what the release date was in a news segment a couple of episodes ago, but I can't remember what it is now. Are we just like, it hits, we're smashing through it and then talking about it, or it hits and we're like, don't come here for Vox Machina hot takes for a week because we're going to take some time to get through it?
Surely we have to save them up.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And just do it in, surely, because otherwise Shawn's just going to not.
Well, are
if
they
I'm
releasing
given homework,
weekly?
I will do it.
Oh, intriguing.
Okay. All right.
Ooh, okay,
I am a good
okay.
student. If I am told to watch something, I will watch it.
I don't know. This could be like 4 or 5 hours.
You and I are different people.
of-
If I get homework, I will not do it.
No,
But-
it's not homework for you, Dael. For you, it's
Just
fun.
for
yeah,
Shawn.
this just works out because it's homework for Shawn, but for me, it's just entertainment.
Exactly. All right, we'll figure that out at some point because he's
just
Amazon
like
dropping
last
it all at
time,
once.
it's going to be 3 episodes at a time for like 4 weeks or something like that.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds like a plan. So we can kind of watch it with people as it's dropping. All right, easy. Not too much pressure then on you, Shawn. Speaking of pressure, I might be about to put some pressure on myself because the next segment is going to relate to Chad's question. I'm glad that I got such a detailed, comprehensive answer to that question because this was actually a bit of an experiment on my part. Chad goes by another name, which is Chat GPT, because I typed into Chat GPT. This was the prompt I gave it. Write an email to the Eldritch Lorecast in a casual tone. And this is what I got back. Dael, you've got a confused look on your face. Do you know what Chat GPT is?
No.
Okay, all right. We need to do some
It sounds like the
background.
name of an AI.
It is, yeah. So
Okay,
it's
great.
this AI that folks have been going absolutely bananas over the last couple weeks. But it's not an art generator. I don't know if this makes it any better. And so that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up in conversation. It's not an art generator. It's a text
You know
generator.
what? I no longer feel guilty for thinking that it was awkwardly worded now that I've gone and read that. I remember thinking, this person's a bit weird.
So
I thought I was mean, but it's just not a human.
no, that's not a human. So I originally put write an email to the Eldritch Lorecast asking a D&D question. And the first email said, "Dear sir or madam, would you like to talk about D&D on the Eldritch Lorecast? I think that it would be an excellent, topic for your show, blah, 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 blah." And I was like, okay, all right. So then I typed, write an email to the Eldritch Lorecast in a casual tone specifically, and this is what it spat back out. Folks have been going crazy over Chat GPT specifically. Apparently it'll make your coffee, it'll pat your dog, it'll do everything for you. It can code, so you can write computer code using it, or you can put your own computer code into it and say something like, "What is wrong with this code?" And it can identify what's wrong inside of it. It can do very rudimentary D&D stat blocks. I have experimented with it with that, saying like, write me a stat block for a Nokken, which is like a sort of, I've learned the name playing God of War, but it's basically a Eastern European water monster. So I don't imagine they necessarily would be, but I'm just curious because it feels like the conversation around text-generated AI is different than the conversation around art-generated AI, and I'm curious on your takes on it and how effective it was. Obviously, it didn't quite fool Dael.
Well, to be fair, okay, recently my mum and I have gotten into a habit of doing, it's bad because it does train AI to be better, but doing those quizzes that's like, can you tell if this is AI or not?
Sure. Right.
And we did this sort of comprehensive one that was like, there were paintings, there were photos, there were, writing excerpts and stuff. And we got every single writing question correct. We could tell the difference between someone who is a human writing awkwardly and someone who is not a human writing awkwardly. It was, I don't know whether that's just me and my particular background in English lit and whatever. Yeah, I'm pedantic. I have one of my proudest achievements ever was this quiz of modernist authors, not all of whom I had read, and I picked every author exactly based on a paragraph of text I'd never encountered before, like 20 out of 20. It's a skill I have. What can I say?
That's the power of pedantry.
Exactly.
In fact, if I ever get an AI to write your stat block, Dael, I'm making sure it includes the power of pedantry.
Good. Thank you for that. But did anyone else read this and think it was a bit awkwardly worded?
It's a little weird. It was, I don't know. I've gotten weird emails before. This one could have fooled me.
I'm a teacher. I have gotten the weirdest things that you've ever read in your life. And you would say, boy, I wish this was AI, but I'm sure it isn't.
Well, that's interesting because talking with Mum about it, because Mum, teaches at uni and stuff, and we were talking about these news articles that were coming out that were students saying, I use AI to write my essays and the teachers can't pick up on it. And we were like, I don't know. I feel like we've seen people write really bad. I have some examples fresh in my mind, but I shall not dip into them. They are but young university students. They might learn still. But, you get some really rubbish essays, but there is something that is distinctly different about rubbish essays written by an artificial intelligence that I think more than anything, it seems to me that it's not that you can't pick up on there being something wrong with it. It's that how do you then prove it? How do you then, it's so much work and effort to then go to the trouble of saying this student didn't write this essay, it might have been an AI, right? Like there's so much burden of proof, there's so much work that goes into following that up that it's just like.
Let me, just for the sake of those listening, I'll quickly read out what the email actually said.
Yeah, do it. Read it to them.
It said, hey guys, I just wanted to reach out and say thanks for all the awesome content you've been putting out on the Eldritch Lorecast. I've been a big fan of D&D for years now, and it's always great to have a place to turn to for new ideas and inspiration for my campaigns. Oh, thanks, Chat GPT.
That's what made me sus, because I was like, we don't really do that.
I was wondering if you'd be interested in doing an episode on the Plane of Shadow. I feel like it's a really interesting and underutilized plane in the game, and I think your listeners would get a lot out of hearing more about it. Let me know what you think. Thanks again for all the hard work you put into the show. And then I signed it Chad, but it said put your name here, basically. So yeah, it is like I didn't give it much of a second look after I said put in a casual tone. Now that I'm looking at it again, it's like, yeah, okay, it is still more. So I would have been interested to experiment with it more and say more write me the same email, but more casual than that, and see where you can kind of get it to. Because the art seems to be of using an AI seems to be like learning how to put in the right prompts.
Right. That level of formality actually threw me off because there are a lot of nerds online who are sort of weirdly formal in the way they write. It's like,
I'm sitting right here.
Yeah. I mean, there's a sort of Reddit-ish quality to that.
I think you'll find that they say salutations.
You, good sir, have won the internet. There's a lot of good sirs that get thrown around and sort of weirdly formal internet nerd parlance. And yeah, that totally fooled me.
Yeah, okay. I mean, for me, the question's not necessarily so much around like, did this fool? Like, I wasn't out to kind of be like, ha, I tricked you all. But more, do you feel differently about this compared to art-generated AI, especially because the way that like this has been suggested as a tool for creative writing is to use it to do the heavy lifting of getting off of a blank page and going like, I know that I want to describe a scene set in the Feywild, and I know there's going to be trees there, but I'm having a bit of writer's block. I can't quite get the wording down. I don't even know where to start. No, this isn't right. I shouldn't start on the trees. Let me start on something else. So you go to a program like this, you put in a couple of prompts to refine it down, and then you go in and edit it almost like you're an editor rather than an author, kind of shaping it and sculpting it into exactly what you want it to be and putting it into your authorial voice. Is that something that you would see yourself doing? Would you have a problem with other writers doing it? Like if you were to hire a freelancer and they've used an AI generator to help themselves, obviously you don't want a freelancer submitting entirely AI generated work. That's more the conversation I kind of want to bust open rather than does this fool us as real people?
Ultimately, it comes down to two things for me. And I think right now, at least, AI art does these two things more egregiously than AI text prompts do. But I feel like the day that text gets to the point I'm about to bring up may be on us sooner than we think. And the two things are, one, where was the data set trained? What samples were fed into it to get the output? Because if you're training it on things that are commercially available, then you are plagiarizing.
Sure.
You are stealing other people's work, and you're laundering it, but you're stealing other people's work. And the second is, does this devalue creative work? Does this give companies the ability to skip the writer hiring process entirely, use an AI, and then get an editor to sand it over, smooth it over, and then cut costs and cut out half the industry by doing it? And we're not at that point yet. I don't think the quality of its output is good enough. But just like with AI art, it's fun to laugh at hands that have 7 fingers on them because, haha, AI art can't do hands, haha. But like, that's not the point. The point isn't that it's not good. The point is that it is devaluing creative labor and stealing from creative people.
Mm.
We're into philosophy now rather than game design, and I may have slept through a philosophy class or 7 in my youth, but I did not plagiarize my papers, so that was good. No, if my students, when I teach this class, which starts in 2 weeks, I am going in to try to give these students something that they can learn from. And I'm not grading them on the quality of their work. I'm grading them on the process of their work. And if this process involves them punching a few keys, then they are losing out. Even if I don't recognize the fact that it's AI created, they're the ones that are wasting their own time by not putting the work in, because they hopefully are there to learn to do this. So, academically, that's my stance on it. Business-wise, originality is very important. And that's something that AI can maybe be trained to do, but we're not there yet, writing-wise, is I want good writing to surprise me. And none of these, these are just questions that you prompted, and there shouldn't be anything surprising in it. Mm. But in fiction, and even in game design and adventure design, I want to say, wow. And AI is never going to make me say wow, because there is no algorithm to do what's not expected.
It averages things out. That's how it
exactly
figures things out. Yeah,
exactly. And so I get tons of student writing. I get tons of freelance writing that comes to me, and it's good. It's fine. It does its job, but I don't say, wow, I did not see that twist of phrase coming. I did not see that image put next to this image to work in a way that my brain is on fire now because I saw that. Because this noun and this verb came together in this way, there's a fire. And that's what good writing should do. And so you can, if you need to use AI to get the raw material down and then go in and change it in a way that makes me say, wow, I can probably live with that. But that's going to be just as much work. That's where the real work is. Right? I've heard James say this, and I say this a lot. Writing is like molding clay. It's like sculpting. You're creating the clay with that first draft, and then you are revising it in a way that makes it something unique and beautiful and stunning. And, if you need that AI to give you your clay, okay, I won't complain about that. You just better be putting the work in to make it a beautiful sculpture and not just a lump of clay that came out of the AI generator.
Mm.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I didn't think of this before. And my apologies once again to fake Chad, but but I do feel like part of again the sniff test for me is that I feel like usually, this is a compliment for Chat, usually the emails that we get from listeners are really engaged in what the podcast has previously said, and are really engaging. And this just felt like a very sort of hollow, flat question. And now that you've put it that way, I realize that it's because it's looking for averages. It's like, okay, I got to be casual and I got to ask something about D&D. So it just pulled something that really had nothing to do with anything we've said, and that it clearly didn't have sort of a stake in hearing more about. There was no wow factor.
Cool. Well, for the record, I knew this was slightly risky. I apologize if anybody the intention was not to fool. The intention was to start a conversation about AI art. So I just want to say thank you for your very comprehensive answers about the Shadow Realm, because I learnt something.
I was delighted to get got by that prompt. I mean, that's the sort of thing that, once you're aware of it, keeps you on your toes. It's good to be aware that, any piece of thing online, no matter how innocuous, could have an ulterior purpose or an ulterior origin behind it.
Sure.
See, we've learned here today that Joey and Shawn are both open-minded individuals, and I'm suspicious as hell.
It's not suspicion, it's jaded. It's jadedness.
That's it. I'm jaded as hell.
No, that's me. You can be suspicious. I'm jaded. Yeah, I'm just like,
Gotcha.
Yeah, okay.
Open, jaded, suspicious.
Right. I'm not grading Chad on, I'm not analyzing his writing. So
and now all the viewers know that I will judge their questions if they're boring.
That's right. And they better be spelled correctly too.
Yeah, you
or at least misspelled in fun and interesting ways.
That's right.
All right, I think we've got time for one more question. This one's pretty quick. This comes from Jeremy, who's definitely a real person. I know this because Jeremy's actually a friend of mine. Jeremy, and I can prove they're a real person because they actually have a D&D podcast called D&D and TV. They say, how well do you want to file off the serial numbers, so to speak, of the influences that you include in your game? So we've talked, I think a previous email listener asked about, where to draw influences from, how you set up your adventures, et cetera, et cetera. Do we care about, their example was Dracula, like Strahd being a very deliberate homage to Dracula, or, we're going to do a Frankenstein's monster, or we're going to, this plot is ripped straight from Dune or something like, whatever it happens to be. Or do we not, as GMs, really care if our players get the thrill of seeing the wink and the nudge towards, our favorite pop culture references?
This goes right back to the previous question for me. Yeah, which is, you can use influences all you want. You are conditioned by your influences. You always think back to the things you've read, the things you've seen, and that will inform your creations. But make it new. You don't need to file anything off, but make it new. The only time I wouldn't file something off is if it was satire, or if it was specifically meant to be called back to. So if you're Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory adventure, is a satire. So you want people to know what it is, and you want them to recall the movie or the book or the other movie. Then you should leave those serial numbers on so they get the joke, or they get the clue that you left them for how to continue through the adventure. Otherwise, there's nothing new under the sun. So make it yours, regardless of what you are stealing from.
I like to keep my influences fairly opaque, at least when it comes to story and characters.
Can I get a synonym of how you're using opaque real quick?
Yeah. I like to make it unclear to my players what exactly
the
I'm
American
drawing
use of
inspiration
opaque.
from.
Okay.
Now, hold on. What else could opaque mean?
Clear, obvious, right there.
No, it's the opposite of transparent. Transparent is clear.
You know what? This is what it is.
Anyway.
Is opaque mean clear in Australia? I've never really known what it meant.
Not clear as in see-through, but clear as in you can see what it is.
Like baking paper.
What? No, what? No.
I don't know.
No.
We've
you got
hijacked
transparency,
James's
which
point.
you can see through. You've got opaque, which is the opposite, but you can see what it is. Look, go ahead, James.
Anyway, I like my influences when it comes to my players to be relatively mysterious. I like my players to think of me as a creative god, essentially. But it gets to the point where like I will, borrow soundtrack from video games or film or TV or whatever and use it. And if my players ever ask me, "Oh, is that from Dark Souls?" I'm like, "God damn it. I picked wrong. I picked something they knew. I will erase all of that from my D&D playlist now because they're aware of its origin and because it's conjuring ideas in their mind via association that I didn't intend for them to imagine, in a more direct way than I would like. I love it when ideas spring into my player's mind because they're like, "Ooh, I know this genre. I like this genre. I'm gonna use this genre trope. I'm gonna twist this genre trope." And when it's like, "Oh, I know this example of this story from this genre. I'm going to use some inspiration from this verbatim." I'm like, "Nah, that's not what I wanted. Not what I wanted. I wanted you to see my creativity. I wanted me to see your creativity. I wanted to see something kind of new and fresh from both of us."
I'm really similar, particularly when it comes to music. I feel bad because I have players who recommend tracks from their favorite games to be added to the battle music, but I don't like using, with the exception of when they're in town, where I tend to use instrumental versions of pop songs and things like that because I want it to feel like you're down at the shops and like you're like, "I know this song, this is a pop," right? So you're safe and that's the vibe. But anytime that they're not in town, I try to get music that my players won't recognize. But broadly speaking, I'm on the opposite end. With a couple exceptions, obviously, I like to tell my players what palette I'm working with, the inspirations I'm using for a game. So like before I mentioned for my Mega Dungeon, what was it? It was like Dead Space, Halo, the Mary Celeste, things like that. I would, in my packet of information about the upcoming game, I would tell my players that this is the palette that I'm working with for my inspiration, because then they can build characters to match that palette and it sets their expectations for the kind of game that they're coming into. So I like to be pretty opaque.
Right. So the idea is that this is an opaque cup. I can see that it's a cup, but I can't see through the cup. Is that what you're...
Let's get to the real question here. What the hell does opaque mean?
Yeah, I think that just using music as an example there, for me, I think it depends on what I want from, like what reaction I want from my players or the people that I'm with. Because I agree, sometimes I don't like, if I want to play sci-fi music because I'm playing Infinity or I'm playing Twilight Imperium or something like that, or we're playing a space D&D game, I don't want to play the Star Wars soundtrack, right? Because that that puts people in a specific mind frame that I don't necessarily want to put them into, because they associate that with Darth Vader and Star Destroyers and all that sort of stuff. So I might look for something a little bit more obscure like Mass Effect, where, you know, if you're a fan of Mass Effect, you might know those tunes, but otherwise it just kind of sounds like ambient space music in some way. But if I want players to, and using music again as an example, whenever we play Wingspan, which is a very pleasant board game to play where you're just like building your nest. I have very pleasant sort of piano, like bird watching music on in the background. But there's a specific mechanic in that game which I call Murder Bird, which is basically when a bird eats another bird. It's like the most aggressive thing you can do in that game. And I always swap the soundtrack over to the Jewel of the Fates very specifically whenever a murder bird action is taking place, because I want that music has recognition with like something epic and dangerous is happening right now. Like I want them to recognize that song and have those associations. So I think it's similar to what you were saying, Dael, in terms of like, you're not playing tavern music when they're in town, like Skyrim tavern music. You're playing instrumental pop songs because that's what they're going to associate with safe place rather than.
So
right.
The way I see it, whenever we use deliberately familiar elements, we're actually playing with metatextuality here.
Sure, yeah.
We're all in an almost literary sense. Just like Shakespeare would talk about, use literary allusion. We're using allusion in our D&D games.
Form and content work together to create meaning.
We're going to have a semiotic discussion. Are we going to bring it back to sophomore year?
No, that's it. That's all I had to say.
That's it. I can tell my brain works differently from everyone else's because I like went right to the plot and the things that are happening in this game that I'm creating. And you're all like, oh, the music is so nice. Like, there will be blood. That's all I know.
I wonder, we're running out of time, so maybe we can't unpack this fully, but I do wonder if there's something to be said about, the newer generations coming through being in a space where they are so exposed to media and pop culture in the way that, like, people of the internet generation communicate with memes, and they communicate through recognizable images and symbols and music and, story elements and stuff, where you're constantly seeing GIFs, I don't care, either one, of like Michael Scott from The Office. And that's how people like communicate, to the point where they say LOL in real life, was like a big explosion point of mental thinking. It was the green screen of your own background, of your own home, back when I was a teenager. So I wonder if there's something to be said around like not wanting to file off the serial numbers for a specific effect is increased with people who grew up in the internet age. Does that make sense? It's a hypothesis, not a.
I just heard you call me old. Is basically what I just heard. So.
Not what I intended.
No.
Well, I guess we'll just have to leave this discussion opaque.
Yes.
The year of punching commences.
This has been a risky episode of the Lorecast for me in terms of upsetting people. Anyway, I'm going to put my opaque cup down and end the podcast right there. If you want to send us a real dinky-die, born-in-the-wool email, a fair dinkum email, you can send it to podcast@ghostfiregaming.com, or send us an AI one that you generated yourself and send that through and see if we can tell the difference. Either or, both are fine. Come join us.
Those are legit Australian phrases, just so the two of you are clear. Those are legit.
I've heard them both. Oh, yeah.
You can, of course, come hang out on Twitch live, as our chat has been. Thank you so much, chat, for joining us again at the start of this year. We're here every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, and then Monday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. Got those the right way around. Or, of course, you can catch us on YouTube, which is Ghostfire Podcasts, and subscribe to us there to show support for the channel. It's great to be back. Love you all. I've been Ben Byrne here with James Haig, Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, and we will definitely see you next week. Wait, no, we will get taken down from YouTube. We can't do this. We get taken down from YouTube.